Hello, I'm Thom Duval. I'm the pastor of Word of Hope Lutheran Church in Lexington, Kentucky, and this is the sermon redo from Sunday, June 23rd, 2013, and that's the fifth Sunday after Pentecost. The gospel reading is from Luke chapter 8. Then Jesus and his disciples arrived at the country of the Gerasenes, which is opposite Galilee. As he stepped out on land, a man of the city who had demons met him. For a long time he had worn no clothes, and he did not live in a house but in the tombs. When he saw Jesus, he fell down before him and shouted at the top of his voice, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you, do not torment me." For Jesus had commanded the unclean spirit to come out of the man. For many times it had seized him. He was kept under guard and bound with chains and shackles, but he would break the bonds and be driven by the demons into the wilds. Jesus then asked him, "What is your name?" He said, "Legion," for many demons had entered him. They begged him not to order them to go back into the abyss. Now there was on the hillside a large herd of swine feeding, and the demons begged Jesus to let them enter these. So he gave them permission. Then the demons came out of the man and entered the swine, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and was drowned. When the swineherds saw what had happened, they ran off and told it in the city and in the country. Then people came out to see what had happened. And when they came to Jesus, they found the man from whom the demons had gone sitting at the feet of Jesus, clothed and in his right mind. And they were afraid. Those who had seen it told them how the one who had been possessed by demons had been healed. Then all the people of the surrounding country of the Gerasenes asked Jesus to leave them, for they were seized with great fear. So he got into the boat and returned. The man from whom the demons had gone begged that he might be with him, but Jesus sent him away, saying, "Return to your home and declare how much God has done for you." So he went away, proclaiming throughout the city how much Jesus had done for him. This last Sunday, for one of our worship services, we went out into a garden area, a small worship area, and our worship for the first service at 8:15 was outside. And I'm always struck by the way in which when I hear the gospel reading in that setting, it just sounds different. It sounds different to be in a setting that's more like the original. Jesus didn't have a ministry inside four walls. He was out in the countryside where people could come or go, and according to whatever their feet told them to do. It's amazing to me the way in which when we take it outside the building, it sounds different. It doesn't sound quite so institutional. It sounds like the freedom of good news. This gospel is one of those gospels that takes us right into the teeth of something that we moderns, if I can use that word, we struggle with, this whole notion that Jesus cast out demons. And this gospel reading has an additional element in that. It's not like Jesus just cast out the demon that caused the person to be lame or caused the person to be blind. But there's this conversation, and we wonder, did we miss something? Is there the demonic? Because that's not the way we think about things. And before I go any further, let me say I'm a big believer in medical science and surgery and psychiatry. Big believer. But I think the gospel is pushing us to realize that there's something more in this world, something that we can't quite get a hold of, something we can't quite get our mind around. Is there something demonic in the world? I think everybody has to answer that question for themselves. For me, yeah, I think there's something demonic loose in the world. There's just so many things that we we try to solve. We come up with the technology to solve one thing, and we do a pretty good job of it. Medical science would be one example. And yet that technology itself creates just a whole raft of new problems. We say those are unintentional consequences. We'll work the bugs out. But don't you get the sense in this world, I mean, even apart from the most gross examples of what we call evil, that even in the ordinary, there's something more at work against that which is of God. Someone has suggested that the monsters we imagine, as we imagined them, the monsters that we imagine and create are always something really different, something really far away from us, far away from what we are like. And we do that very intentionally so that we don't have to confront the more familiar monsters, demons that lie close at hand. I think there's something to that. I mean, we create Freddy Krueger, we create Chainsaw Massacre, we create Jason, or closer to reality, we look at the monsters who carry out such terrible acts of tragedy in schools or movie theaters. And we convince ourselves that, well, they're really different. That's not like me. But then we think more deeply into what is like me, and the jealousy and the anger and the hatred that boils up so easily. And we realize it is like me. It is like me. There's something deep within me that has to be cast out, can only be cast out. I think it's significant that in this passage, Jesus asks for the name of the demonic, and I think there's something to this. If you've followed these sermon redos, I've said this a couple of times. That which we will not acknowledge cannot be healed. You know, in our society, we call it ambition. It's really greed. We ought to name it for what it is. You know that in the Bible, there's something like 2,400 passages that speak against greed. How often do we talk about greed? We don't want to talk about it because it's the demon that's close at hand. It's the one we're familiar with. It's not greed. It might be greed in you. It's not in me. For me, it's an appropriate concern for my future. It's an appropriate concern for my family. We need to get in the habit of naming it for what it is. And then there's that scene. The people come out and they see Jesus. And the man who has been healed is sitting at the feet of Jesus, clothed and in his right mind. I think about that. I think about the healing that comes at the feet of Jesus. That when I'm left to my own devices, I can be filled with anger and resentment and fear and all kinds of stuff. But I'm drawn back to the feet of Jesus, and I hear him say to me, do not be afraid, don't be anxious, don't be worried, don't be concerned. I got it covered. And there's something about sitting at the feet of Jesus that has this healing quality to it. And I love that phrase that the guy was in his right mind. I think about that. I think about that passage that Paul later on would write to the Philippians and say, have this mind among yourselves, this mind of Christ Jesus, who, though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, a thing to be hoarded, a thing to be just held on to with your last ounce of energy, but rather poured himself out, humbled himself, taking on human form, even humbled himself unto death on the cross. That's really my right mind. when I come to see that in Jesus, I'm invited to serve other people. We had a group of people, young people, that came and stayed at the church this last weekend, and I could see, they're coming back from a mission trip, and I could see it in their faces. I see it on the faces of our kids when they come back from a mission trip. I can feel it on my own face when I have served someone else. I tell myself that it's all about being noble and helping someone else. And then when I experience it, I realize that I don't know who got more out of it, them or me. There is something about serving others, about having the mind of Christ, that puts me in my right mind. Puts me in my right mind. I think it's striking in this passage. Fear is mentioned twice, and it's not in the guy who's been healed. It's in the folks who see him having been healed. It's in the pig herders. They ask Jesus to leave. They're afraid. Why do they ask Jesus to leave? Because, well, this healing thing isn't good for business. You know, he's cast the demons into the pigs, and they ran into the lake. And how many times do we say that to ourselves, that, you know, it wouldn't be good for business if we all followed Jesus? What would happen to the economy if we sought for everybody to be healed? People are frightened. This being healed, this finding our wholeness in Jesus has risks. This is not easy, and you see that in that very last scene. The guy, understandably, wants to go with Jesus. He's been healed. Jesus has disciples with him. He has followers. Why shouldn't this guy become one of those followers? And Jesus says, no, I want you to stay. I want you to tell people what God has done for you. And you think, what an impossible job. This guy is supposed to tell other people what God has done for him. All these people that have asked Jesus to leave, this one guy, he's going to make a difference. The guy doesn't know anything about demonology, doesn't know anything about theology, he hasn't been properly schooled, he hasn't had 5 minutes worth of evangelism training or preaching or proclamation or Sunday school. Jesus simply says, tell the folks what God has done for you. And here I'm going to suggest that you don't try to explain demonology. Don't try to explain theology. Don't try to be who you aren't. Be who you are. Live the faith. Tell other people what Jesus has done for you. Tell other people what it's meant for you to sit at the feet of Jesus. Tell other people what it's like to come into your own right mind. Tell other folks what you've experienced. Because here's the deal. You might be that one person where you live and move and have your being, where you go to school, where you work, where you shop for groceries, where you mow the lawn. You might be that one person that somebody else needs you to tell the story. Tell what God has done for you. Peace be with you in your own journey of faith. Peace be with you.